Welcome to the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel. By watching this channel, you are accepting that the content on this channel is intended for educational purposes only. We strive to provide valuable information to help you enhance your technical understanding. We do not condone the use of pirated software. Please respect local copyright laws and support software developers by using legitimate purchased products. All testing conducted on this channel is done in compliance with the Consumer Review Fairness Act and the United States Fair Use Act under Copyright Law, Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act. We aim to provide honest reviews, security configuration tricks, tips, and how-tos. While we make every effort to deliver 100% tested solutions, we acknowledge that we don't know everything. If you have additional insights or corrections, please share them in the comments. Like and subscribe to keep up with the latest OS reviews and security tips. Your support helps us continue to provide valuable content.
Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video, I figured we would review something, I would say, much different than what we've reviewed in the past. And specifically what I'm talking about is the ability to find jobs on the internet. Now, I know the vast majority of people that watch my videos watch them throughout the day, so I got to assume that there's a lot of people that are without a job and they are just trying to keep up on tech, IT, or just are interested in technical details, data. But I figure it would be helpful to figure out how it is that I can help you find a job. So I want to start off this video by telling you straight out that Indeed sucks, and that is indeed the truth. Maybe that should be their slogan, is this is indeed the worst job site or job hunt that you can ever use. Now, Indeed feeds other sites, so Indeed is pretty much the central point where most job positions are going to be available. Now, you may get lucky, you may find things on LinkedIn, you may find things on ZipRecruiter, but Glassdoor is Indeed for the most part. You may have some things that are different on Glassdoor than they are on Indeed, but for the most part, Glassdoor is fed by Indeed. There's a lot of sites out there actually that use Indeed as the centralized hub that they use. And the reason why is they use API to pull the Indeed job listing job boards. So it's helpful for other sites. And quite frankly, using other sites to search Indeed in a lot of ways really helps you because the Indeed search function is god-awful. And I don't really have to tell you that. I'm sure anybody that's out of work or has ever looked for a job Indeed, especially since COVID, has found it excruciating to dig through all the job ads. Between the constant bombardment of annoying ads asking you questions about your technical background that have nothing to do with the job that you're actually applying to the questions or the issues where, these companies that are hiring are asking you to fill out third-party information that they're legally not allowed to ask you. Nobody's allowed to ask you how old you are. So if they ask you what your birthday is or when you graduated high school, then they know how old you are. Thus, that's not legal. It's against the law for them to ask that question on an application. That's legitimately called age discrimination. They're just not legally allowed to do it, at least in the US. Now, I can't talk about other countries. I'm not sure. If somebody wants to throw something down in the comments and let me know if that's legal in other countries, let me know. I'd be interested in knowing. But in the US, at least, they can't ask you that when you are applying for a job. Another thing that they do now, which is the DEI testing, which is basically the ability for them to get tax breaks and tax incentives if you are a mixed race or minority, or if you have a disability. They get a discount on hiring you, thus making the tax break for them. And in a lot of ways, that's the reason why you get the job. I still think that's discrimination against people that don't have disabilities. And quite frankly, if you're good at a job, whether or not you have a disability, shouldn't make any difference one way or another if you're good at the job. So generally speaking, when they ask me, what my background is, my race, my age, my gender, all that information, I don't tell them anything. I opt out of it. Because quite frankly, if I'm going to get the job, I want to get the job because I'm good at it or I can do the job, not because of the color of my skin, the age of me, or maybe because I have a disability. Those shouldn't be factors factoring into getting a job. So let's jump into Indeed, or the worst search site that I've ever used in my life. And I'm comparing that to things from like the 90s when we had AOL to do searches or Metacrawler. This is worse. So what I want to do is I want to search for a Windows administrator position. And I want to search remote. Now, remote should be an easy thing to do because I want somebody to define down in the comments, what does remote mean? Okay, so we did a search for a Windows administrator and we wanted a remote position, right? So remote position, at least to me, means that the position is remote. I'm sitting in an office at my home. I'm sitting in an office at a rented space. I'm sitting in a Starbucks. It really shouldn't make a difference where I am. But the remote position is located in another state, another country, another location, another territory. It could be cloud related. It doesn't really make any difference. I'm in a remote location working. I'm not on site somewhere. That, to me, is the definition of a remote job. But if you're doing a search on Indeed, that is not what remote means. Remote doesn't actually do anything. As a matter of fact, I'm convinced this whole search bar up here does nothing. The keywords, I think, is actually matching based off of even just individual letters and non-actual words or phrases. And I can't figure out if that's something they did with AI, which, again, it's like having a conversation with a 4-year-old about what the position you're trying to do is, because AI is not developed far enough yet in order for this to be actually useful. So what we have now is we have the ability to tell a 4-year-old we want to be a Windows admin. They're not going to have any idea what that is. Now, in 20 years, that same AI, because it learns all of the changes, all of the updates and everything else, and then hopefully they still retain developers to add the information into the AI structure and to fix things. But assuming that they do that, let's say that in 20 years, a Windows administrator may be defined differently than it would be to a 4-year-old. Because AI, in its infancy, doesn't know what a Windows administrator is, just like an HR department doesn't know what a Windows administrator is. So unfortunately, because AI is involved here, it's kind of ruined the ability for the vast majority of us to find jobs. The companies that are in control of these job boards or functions or placements, they have relied heavily on AI to actually fill the positions, where the AI not only does the job board, but it also does the search for the employer and matches keywords off your resume. And obviously, if the UI is broken where the search function doesn't work correctly, or it matches keyword and phrases based off of letters, then you're not going to have jobs that show up on your searches. You're not going to have positions that you would actually be qualified to do show up on your searches. And then that works the same way for the people that are trying to fulfill the position, because when they do the search, they're not seeing the same clients or the employees that they would generally find in a non-AI structured network where they spend the time and actually look for the people. So unfortunately with Indeed, I don't think that there's any way to fix this from the management side, but there is a way to help us to find jobs from a user side. Now, I'm sure somebody has already added in the comments, just use a different website. Use Indeed, or not Indeed, rather, or use Glassdoor, use ZipRecruiter, use Dice, use Monster. And those sites do work. They do, but they just don't have the same amount of people. Now, you could use LinkedIn as well to search for jobs, and that may be helpful in some cases as well. Google you could use to search for jobs, but you'll find that if you spend all this time searching for the same job on 5 different websites, you'll find that same job on the 5 different sites. And it'll be posted probably by 5 different companies because it'll turn out to be a contract and not full-time, because unfortunately, as much of it is an issue in Indeed itself, there's additional issues with Indeed because you end up with shady people that are actually trying to fulfill the position, or they're trying to trick you into applying for the position so they can gain access, and phishing attempts. It's a big deal right now for companies that are fake to be created on this Indeed site, and they use the information to try to gather details about you. So at this point, it's actually not recommended that you put your first and last name on a resume. You should definitely not use your cell phone number that's associated to anything other than, a burner phone temporarily to apply for jobs. The email address that you use to apply for jobs should also not have anything to do with you. It shouldn't be something that could search back to you. You should absolutely never provide an address, a full address, because you could use the county auditor's sites to pull back details about your residence. So if you own a home, they could use that information to try to restructure your mortgage. These are all things that I've actually seen actively on the back end doing cybersecurity. So it's not a good idea to have this information on your resume. And a lot of these companies ask for this crap inside of Indeed. And if you see that, just cancel the application. It's not worth it, because even if the job might be legit, there's also a possibility that it's not legit. And if it's not legit and you apply for this job and you give them access to your full name, your address, your phone number, all this detail, they could use that information for phishing attempts to try to gain access to your personal data and records. Thus, Indeed really should stop the ability for companies to do this. They should put their foot down, but they don't, because they don't care. They clearly don't care, because even the search function, which is the most basic function of a job search board, doesn't work. And I'm sure you guys are going to say, oh, Tech Guy 1, you're wrong, because their search function, brought back Windows Administrator. These are Windows Administrator positions. And, you search for remote, and this is clearly remote. But if we scroll down here, we're going to see remote in San Jose, California. Now, can somebody tell me what that means? What is remote in? Because to me, remote in means hybrid, right? That means they want somebody that's relatively close to this location that could come into the job every now and then, but work remote. And that's a hybrid position, not a remote in. I don't know what remote in means. Somebody add that down in the comments and tell me what remote in means, because it sounds like common sense is kind of skipped on whoever posted this job. I don't think I would take that job, because to me, putting remote in just sounds, it's not good English. I mean, even just down to the fact that it just doesn't make sense. Either it's remote or it's in a location, which is not remote. Or, we could go down here and we could also see, all right, well, we have other jobs here. We have hybrid. So this makes more sense. Remote in Westbury, Massachusetts. It's a hybrid position. That makes sense. But why is it a hybrid position? Because I go up here and I actually choose the location. Maybe it's not location. Bear with me here for a second. Okay. If I choose remote and I put hybrid, you'll notice that it will remove the remote up here, but not because it removed it because I added hybrid, or rather because it's not remote anymore, but because there's something wrong with the site that it doesn't retain changes when you make a change. So if I change Windows Administrator to like Windows Engineer, and I hit enter, the hybrid's going to go away because it doesn't retain changes when you make any changes up above. It'll yell at you to tell you you're missing things for the where location, but even if you add that and you change something in your search function to look for something different, it removes it into the location. Thus, the whole search thing in Indeed is broken. It's been broken for 4 years, which is why I say they don't care. They just collect money from you, and they don't care if you find a job. They don't care about anything. Just keep collecting money, and they don't update or fix their actual website. All right, so I'm going to actually go through this thing, and I'm going to add all of the options that I think we need for finding a Windows engineer position remote. We want a remote position that's not a remote in position, because remote in is stupid and doesn't exist. But if I choose hybrid in here, I'm obviously going to remove my remote, but I should now see hybrid position. So hybrid work in Chicago. That makes sense, right? Because if in a hybrid situation where you're working from home and then some days you have to go in, hybrid makes sense. But remote in doesn't make any sense. It's just either you're in there or you're remote. Somebody let me know. Again, down in the comments, let me know what you think, because to me, this seems really stupid, but maybe I'm just not looking at it from the right angle. So if you could explain to me what remote in means versus a hybrid in location, that would be super helpful, and it might help other people who are actually functionally searching for jobs, because to me, this doesn't make any sense. Okay, so we don't want to do hybrid. We're going to choose to do remote. So we're going to choose remote. And then, unfortunately, again, because of the way the stupid site works, that's not enough. Because if we just choose remote and we search down here, we're still going to see this remote in garbage that doesn't make any sense. But if we change the location to remote, so now we have to do remote. And honestly, if you want to do this the right way, this should also say remote. So it should be remote in order to find the remote positions, which again, broken. So why isn't this tied to this? It just doesn't make any sense. Something's broken in the actual console. But so now we chose remote. We chose Windows Engineer. And if we search through here, we're going to find Systems Administrator. We're going to find other stuff in here too that doesn't have to do Like a mechanical design engineer is not a Windows engineer. It's not the same thing. It's a software engineer is not a Windows engineer. Again, so that it doesn't match the phrases that you search. We could even go another layer here, and we could say, we only want to do a full-time job versus a contract or anything else. And you're going to find in here that you deal with shady headhunter companies. These remote companies that try to do job placement, staffing firms, they got to be the shadiest companies on the planet. And I would suggest, honestly, from somebody that's been in engineering and a systems engineer and systems admin in the Microsoft world for 24, 25 years now, if you see something from Robert Half, just don't even bother. It's a waste of time. These people aren't qualified to put air in your tires at a gas station. You think they're going to know what the difference is between a JavaScript and a Java developer engineer? They're not going to know anything. They have no clue. They just randomly send your resume out to these other companies, and then they talk a good game about how it is that you could do the job. And chances are 90% of the time you'll go in for the interview and be like, I can't, this has nothing to do with what I do. You waste your time. It's just not worth your time. I don't know how these places stay in business. The only thing I could say is that, the companies that hire them on, unfortunately, don't know tech, and they end up with incompetence on both ends, and then they just waste each other's time. So if your time is valuable, don't use headhunters. It's a waste of time. And just to clarify that, let's look, right? So we're going to look for an actual job here that, we'll say is a headhunter. So you can tell right away this is a headhunter, and this is not a full-time job. Full-time jobs don't have hourly rates. We're only going to see salaries in full-time jobs, at least in the U.S. This may be different elsewhere, but in the U.S., we're not going to see an hourly rate on a full-time job, which tells me that they probably have this thing listed incorrectly, or it's a contract, and they're not being forthcoming or upfront. There's something else going on here, or it's paid through a headhunter company and you're not actually employed by the company. So chances are you don't get benefits. There's probably no retirement. There's probably no health care. So you end up working yourself to death for nothing. It's usually the case with these jobs. So you got to be real careful when you look at this stuff, because chances are this right here is a contract. It's not a full-time job. I mean, the other things we could see is we could actually jump through this actual job listing here and see right away that we did search for a Windows engineer, and it's not a Windows engineer position. Specifically, if we look, we could see that we have Windows, but we also have Unix and Novell. That's not going to be a Windows engineer position. That's more than likely going to be a systems engineer position. And again, because this is associated to a headhunting company, KLA, it's a headhunting company. You can even see it here, talent acquisitions at KLA.com. That's a headhunter. They don't know what they're looking for. And as a result, this position will just never be filled, because when you do a search for a Windows engineer, or they're looking for a Windows guy that also knows Linux and Unix, then they want a master's degree and everything else. Forget it. This is never happening. I mean, you could really point that out, that people generally who have master's degree in computer science don't have backgrounds in Novell. And if they do have backgrounds in Novell, they don't have a master's degree in computer science, because Novell, when it was at its popularity, was really probably closer to my dad's age versus my age. And at this point, my kids would be in their 20s. So we're talking, 40 plus years of age in technology, probably the 1980s. Those people generally, when they got into the tech world, they didn't have master's degrees in computer science. It just didn't exist. That wasn't an option. So this is a pipe dream that doesn't exist. And again, you could tell, headhunter, because they just don't know any better. They're basically they're qualified to be an HR department, and that's about it. So they're like a remote HR department that has no knowledge whatsoever about the technology that you're talking about, and they're trying to fulfill a position. So when you're doing these searches to look for jobs, something else I would tell you to do is review the job listing. And if you see things like this and it's listed as full-time, then either A, it's not tech, because tech jobs don't pay hourly rates. And the reason why is because they know it's going to take you more than 40 hours a week to work in a tech job. But they're not going to pay you for more than 40 hours. So that means what you have to do is you actually have to define your salary rating by the amount of hours that you currently work. And chances are, if you're in an engineering role, you're working 50 to 60 hours a week. So if you do 50 to 60 hours a week, and you multiply that by your $20 an hour, which is the equivalent of like a $40,000 a year job on 40 hours, but you have to multiply the total amount of time that you actually work by the hours that the hourly rate that you feel is sufficient for your job function and title. And that's the salary you look for, not the one that's based off of the 40 hours, because you'll never work 40 hours in an engineering role. And these hourly rates don't exist as a full-time job as a computer person in the United States. They're not going to pay you more money to do the job. They're going to pay you as little as they possibly can to do the job. And as a result, you're going to end up working yourself to death for basically minimum wage if you don't do your math correctly when you apply for these jobs. So keep that in mind when you're applying for jobs. Do you really want to work for a position where you're going to make $100,000 a year? I mean, that's a great salary, right? $100,000 a year. It's roughly about $50 an hour, give or take. Now, we're talking $100,000 a year, and then you take away taxes and everything else, you're probably talking closer to maybe, if you're lucky, $60,000, $65,000 a year. So after taxes, you figure $65,000 a year. Now you're going to work 60 hours. So take that $65,000 a year and divide that by your 60 hours a week that you're going to work, because again, they're not going to pay you overtime. And you're going to find that that salary is really more like $35,000 a year when you factor in all the time that you're actually going to spend. And at that point, $100,000 a year gross salary is just not enough. So you got to factor that stuff in when you apply for these jobs. That's why I most of the time tell people, listen, don't take the senior role if you could avoid it. I mean, if you could get a job as a junior level where there's an escalation point where you don't have to do after hours and they still want to give you $70,000 a year or $80,000 a year, you'd be better off taking the $20,000 loss at $80,000 a year working in the junior level versus a senior level, because you're not going to work the 60 hours in the junior level that the senior is going to work. So you actually take a pay cut in taking that senior level position if the salary is only like $20,000 more a year over a junior level position. So keep that in mind too when you're looking for positions, especially in a systems engineer or network engineering role. Not only that, but again, if you're working in a junior level position, you're only working 40 hours and you can work 60 hours or 70 hours, you can get a job part-time after hours doing like updates or upgrades or something else for another company, making $20 an hour or $15 an hour, whatever it is, $18 an hour, and you would still make more money than that senior level engineer at $100,000 a year would make, because you could work part-time on an hourly rate to make up the difference in the time and actually get paid for the hours you work, thus making more money than if you took the senior level position. So don't think that just because you see a senior level position with these ridiculous salaries listed here, like the one for CrowdStrike, that you're ever going to get it. Because when you go for the actual interview, they're not going to give you this. They're going to give you the threshold on the website to entice you to apply. But when you apply for the job and they actually give you the interview, they're going to lowball you at like 80 to 90 grand. And at that point, is it worth working 60 hours a week as a senior level position in order to make basically only $10,000 to $15,000 more than the junior level? And in most cases, you're going to find it's not. You'd be better off taking a part-time position after hours. Even if you pump gas at a gas station, you'd still make more money than you would at that senior level position. All right, so Tech Guy 1, we've looked at all these jobs. We found that the job function of Indeed is borked. We don't have a real solution for that because Indeed's broken and Indeed doesn't care. We've reviewed the jobs. We know that the job search itself is broken. We know that the vast majority of the companies that exist on here are looking to fulfill positions that they can't fulfill because you can't search for the jobs correctly. We know that there are additional positions where they're just scam artists, so you got to watch out for those. What's the solution? Well, the solution is actually pretty simple. And the solution is the reason why this is being recorded on a Linux box and not on Windows. So if we look down on the bottom left-hand side, we're going to see that this is Linux Mint, specifically the latest build version. And I will throw in the wiki specifically where you got to go to get the latest version of the actual Cinnamon edition of Ubuntu Mint or Linux Mint, which is really just a port of Ubuntu. Now, you could use Ubuntu for the same purpose as to what I'm about to show you, or you could use Linux Mint, or you could use basically the 150 other flavors of Debian-based operating systems to do the same thing. Now, the reason why I use Mint is because Mint has better support for NVIDIA drivers. And since a lot of people out there, especially the ones that watch this channel, use NVIDIA video cards for their gaming experiences, you know, it's probably a fair bet or fair assessment to say you should probably use Linux Mint for what I'm about to show you. So I'm going to close out of my browser first because I just don't want to look at it. It's depressing looking at it, knowing that there's all these jobs out there that are thousands of them, and I can't find them because I can't search in the Indeed structure to find them correctly. I also know that there's jobs on LinkedIn. I know that there's jobs on Glassdoor. I know there's jobs in a variety of places, but searching for all those require me to have authentication, sites, and everything else. And then I'm going to sign up for all these things. I'm going to put my resume on all these different places, and I'm going to search all these different job boards. I'm going to find duplicate jobs, which is going to be annoying. I'm going to find jobs that I just don't want, or that I wasted my time on setting up all these different accounts with really no reason to set them up, because the jobs that exist on these sites are not the jobs that I'm looking for. So what's the answer? So I've been searching for a while, and the reason why I was searching is specifically because I wanted to see if there was a simplified version of what I've been doing in the past to find jobs when I've been locating jobs. And specifically what I do is I actually write a Python script. And I use Python through Linux to do a scrape of websites to pull back the data or the details for keywords that I'm looking for my next career. Now, doing this just drastically reduces the amount of time wasted searching job boards, because I could use an application or a program to search all of these different websites and pull the data back into a CSV file. And then I could review the keywords and the job functions, the jobs in my CSV file, and I could then create a list of the jobs that I actually am interested in that I want to apply to. In doing these CSV files, I could also then filter the file itself in the CSV format to filter out duplicates. So if the same job exists on 4 different job boards, I could get rid of it existing on 4 different job boards and just have the one. Or if I want to search for keywords and see if that job is now being not only introduced to me from one headhunter, but then another headhunter, and then maybe the company direct, I could filter that as well. And I could get rid of specific company names or specific keywords, and that reduces the amount of overhead that I use to actually find the jobs that I want to find. Now, keep in mind, in doing this, it is 100% legal to do it, assuming you don't log into these accounts. So if you have your browsers set to cache credentials for authentication into LinkedIn or Indeed, you have to clear that first before you run these scripts, because if it logs in, that's not legal. You can't legally log into the site to do the scraping. You can only do it on data that is publicly available to the internet. So it's important, because that's a legal threshold here when we're talking about this. Now, what you do is up to you, but you can get caught because, it does scrape, it does leave a fingerprint. They do know you've connected. They know you've pulled the data back. And there are some things that could be copywritten in the thing, like, for instance, images that may exist on the websites. Now, it's not going to pull the images back, because it's going to pull the data back directly into the format of a CSV. But it's still going to access that copyrighted data. And as a result, you're not supposed to download that copywritten data that you use from an authenticated purpose to get in. So that's something to keep in mind when you do this. Although, on a less legal standpoint, I will say I had no reason to ever create this API to pull back the data when Indeed actually maintained their website and before AI became a thing. So in the past, I used to just write my own, and it took a long time to do. And the reason why is because every time Indeed would update something or change something, I would end up with a 403 forbidden error, or something stupid would happen where I couldn't actually access the data. And eventually I came across a Git repository. And the Git repository is called specifically JobSpy. And what the JobSpy is it's a Python-based script and a Python-based package that allows you to scrape all of the major job function and job search boards to pull back the data into a CSV file, so that way you can actually apply to jobs that are relevant to what you're looking for. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys how this works. And it's actually really fairly simple. So I found something on the Git repositories, specifically a gentleman or company or group. There are a bunch of contributors in there, and special thanks to them. They call themselves Bunsly, and the application itself is called JobSpy. Now, how this works in a Mint environment is you're going to have to follow these commands and actually get this installed. So I will say that you don't want to do this on your daily driver. You're going to want to do this on a VM and not a system that you use every day. And the reason why is because if you do this the right way, this following command here, this break system package, should not be used. That is really just an addition to force the packages to be installed in your root directory, your home directory, which is not a secure thing to do. You don't want to do that. You want to generally create a package that sits in its own secure location for Python stuff, because Python is not the most secure platform. I mean, it's generally the backbone for what we use for AI, and as a result, it's a little sketch with some things. Not with everything, but with some things. But if there's ever a problem with Python, you don't want to give Python full access to your system, which if you use that command, it will give full access to the system. So this is not the way to do this if you want to do this on a system that you're going to use as a daily driver and leave it as a back-end operation that you can run at any point. That said, if you want to run it just from a VM, this is perfectly fine. It'll save you a bunch of time and it'll actually work. So you could go that route too. Specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to install the Python package or application itself, and then we're going to install all the packages that are associated with Python in order to get JobSpy to work. Then once we have that done, we're going to download or copy over our HTML that we grab off the JobSpy Git repository, and then you're going to modify it to the location you're at and what you're looking for specifically for a job. So for this, I'm using Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, and Google. Now, this doesn't connect directly to Indeed, and the reason why is because Indeed requires an API key. What this does is it scrapes the job function from the Google API, which is open source, that actually connects to the Indeed sites and the rest of these sites to actually look for the jobs. And since you could search using Google search inside of these actual jobs, there's no reason to do it any other way. So what I've done here is I've modified this to the location and the type of system that I actually want to find. So I want to find jobs in the New York City area, New York, New York. I want to find jobs that are 72 hours old in the country of the United States, specifically looking for the search term systems engineer. And I'm going to do this. And then once I do this, I'm actually going to go over to my command line. And I'm going to type in my Python connection or configuration here, which is this Python 3 and then jobspy.py, which is this right here. And I'm going to hit enter. And this is going to pull or scrape all of these different job boards specifically for the data that I added here inside of the code. So that way I don't have to deal with the terrible interfaces of all these different job search functions and job boards that just frankly just don't work right. Okay, so that finished. So you can see the actual results here as far as actually searching. There are some things that do generate errors. This does happen. So you'll see max retries exceeded. That's because I've ran this more than once today, just to see the different results that I pull back from the different sites. Over some time, eventually it starts to block your ability to do this. You can't do it 15 million times. So you could create one of these queries that pulls back instead of like 20 results. You could pull back 100 results and then change your timestamp from 72 hours to maybe like 144 hours or something to that effect. So that way you can pull back more data. So once it does that, it's going to create a CSV file that we can open up and review. Now, I do want to just point out one more thing before we look at that CSV file, is that the reason why we're using Google to scrape is because Indeed recently, I think actually, well, maybe not super recent, maybe it was like February or March of this year, decided what they were going to do is they were going to change their API. They were going to make it open source anymore for certain people to use it to search, to pull back analytics and data, because they knew people like myself and others were using the API function to scrape the data off the website because their search function's god-awful. So what they did is they blocked your ability to do it direct. That's why we're using Google to pull back the same data, because they still allow Google to search within the job boards themselves to pull the data back. So if you're going to try to recreate this or redesign this yourself, I'll just tell you straight out that you can do it, obviously. There's a variety of different ways to do it. And there's actually, you could pay a third-party company and use it to pull back the data. That they charge you a token for just viewing the data, which is the exact same stuff we're going to pull back here for free. But that is a direct connection to Indeed, whereas this is not. This is through a Google search function. So some of the jobs could be off. They may not be 100% because, again, we're relying specifically on the API of Google to pull the jobs back through Indeed, which Indeed we already know is semi-broken. That said, it is a lot better, it's a lot easier, and it's a lot more truncated through this than it is to go through the website. So it is ultra helpful, and hopefully you guys find it helpful. Let's take a look at that CSV file. Okay, so this is build in JobSpy, so you can see we're in the correct location. We have jobs.csv. Let's open this up. The first thing we're going to get is the notification that we have to actually set it, right? So we want to do comma separated values, and basically I'm going to leave this as the default because this is what I had in order to set this up correctly. You could freeze the screen here if you want to look. You want to make sure all your check marks look the same way. And then once you do that, you just click on OK. And you can get information. So you can get the site, the ID, the job URL, right? Now, if we turn on word wrap, obviously this changes, or turn off word wrap, this changes. But if we scroll to the right, we can actually see the description of the job. We can see the qualification information of the job. And if we look, we probably see some pay information in here as well for different jobs. So this file can be different sizes depending on how many jobs it pulls back based off of your query information. But at least in this, for this past 72 hours, it looks like we're probably pulling back about maybe 83 or 84 jobs that meet the systems engineer search. And this meets it based off of all those different websites. And it's not going to pull back duplicate information because it's only going to pull back information that is specific to what we searched, or our search function, which again, every little bit helps you find a job when you're trying to find a job. And having your back up against the wall with that Indeed site, with the lack of your ability to search, is awful. And if you don't need LinkedIn, you could always just remove LinkedIn from up here so you don't get these errors. And you can still search the jobs. And you'll notice down here that as you search the jobs, as it finds jobs, you'll see the job ID. And the job ID exists inside of here as well. So we could actually search the identifiers of the actual positions. So, I mean, there is, like for instance, here's the job ID. This is the website. This is the actual listing. This is the ID for the listing. So if you're looking for the job that you read off to the right in the description, all you have to do is just follow that direct path and it brings you directly to the job so you can apply. Again, this is really designed to just make it easier for you to find positions. All right, guys, so let me know down in the comments what you think. Is this usable? Do you guys have a use for this? Do you think it's helpful? Does it at least help knowing that the rest of us know and feel your pain, that the job boards are hosed, screwed? They've replaced people way too fast with AI, and AI is, again, it's a 3-year-old, it's a 4-year-old, it's a toddler. So when you ask AI or ask a toddler to find you a systems admin position based off of this criteria, they don't know what that means, which is basically what we're dealing with now with the job boards, which is why finding a job right now is so god-awful. It's not because the positions don't exist. I think that there are positions out there for people to apply to. It's finding the position because they replaced actual program language with AI, and AI is crap in these actual websites. So again, let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching.